Winter officially arrives tomorrow, and near the start of every astronomical season, we like to check in with our resident astronomer, Dr. Chris Palma, from the Penn State Department of Astronomy and Astrophysics, just to talk a little bit about space and astronomy. Chris is also Associate Dean for Undergraduate Students in the Eberly College of Science. It's always good to see you, Chris.
Thank you.
At least for me, the biggest recent story was this Artemis spacecraft headed to the moon, successfully came back to Earth last week. I mean, can you update us on that mission and what the future holds?
Yeah. It's amazing that it's been 50 years since we've landed on the moon, and my students are really excited, and I am too. So Artemis 1 was uncrewed, no humans, but showed that a rocket can get to the moon, capsule can orbit and then return, and it's setting the stage for humans to take the furthest trip ever on Artemis 2 in 2024, and then we should potentially have humans land on the moon again in 2025, including the first woman astronaut and the first person of color astronaut walking on the moon.
50 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Finally going back to the moon. So Artemis is about the moon. Let's go one step farther in the solar system out to Mars. Perseverance rover recently making some news, captured a Martian solar eclipse. I mean, the pictures are really neat, but tell us, what does that do for us scientifically?
Great. So a solar eclipse happens when you have a precise alignment between a moon and the sun. And so if we track that solar eclipse, it gives us really good information about the motion of that moon. So Phobos is a little bit different in that this little moon of Mars is predicted to eventually crash into that planet. And so by tracking that eclipse, we can measure very small changes in its path and get better predictions of when it might actually be destroyed by impact on Mars.
Not a bad time to mention Pennsylvanians will be able to see a total solar eclipse in, I believe it's April of 2024. Make your reservations for that one. Let's talk telescopes now. The James Webb Space Telescope's been in place for almost a year now. It's about 1 million miles from Earth. What are some of its new discoveries that really caught your eye?
Well, it's a great one to talk about where our two fields intersect again, right? So I think you've all heard us talk about over the years, we've been really successful at finding planets around other stars. But what we really want to do is characterize them. We want to know, is there another Earth out there? So what James Webb has been doing is measuring the star that hosts planets, and as the planet passes in front of the star, we can actually measure the constituents of the atmosphere of a distant planet. So we can tell that the light from that star is actually affecting the atmosphere of a distant planet around a distant star. Really amazing stuff, and it's one of the things actually James Webb was built to do.
Yeah, it sounds like some textbooks on planetary atmospheres are being rewritten literally by the minute.
Yes.
And I guess there's another space telescope. I don't think we've talked about this one before. It's called the Fermi Gamma Ray Space Telescope. It recently detected an unusually large explosion in the galaxy, in the universe. Tell us about that.
Well, Fermi is another NASA great observatory like Hubble and like James Webb, but we have a small telescope here at Penn State that we operate called SWIFT, and SWIFT and Fermi work together to study these incredible explosions. And it's been decades now that we've been studying what are called gamma ray bursts. And so over those decades, we've really figured out that these are some of the most powerful explosions that can occur in the universe when a star explodes and creates a new black hole. But what Fermi told us is that this most recent one was the most powerful explosion ever. It's roughly the equivalent of taking 3 times the sun's mass and turning it into energy instantaneously. And so they're calling it the boat. The biggest of all time.
Oh, the boat, as opposed to the goat.
Yes.
Okay. NASA typically tries to avoid collisions of its spacecraft with other objects, but there was an intentional collision a few months ago, all in the name of science, goes by the acronym of DART. Bring us up to date on the DART program.
So, and I think we've talked before about movies that you've probably all seen where, if Earth is being endangered by an asteroid, maybe we send some folks up to blow it up, and that's not what we want to do, right? So if you picture this asteroid orbiting the sun and potentially going to impact Earth, what if we just give it a nudge? So now you change its orbit just enough so it will never cross paths with Earth, and that's what we did. The DART satellite was sent on a pathway that caused it to impact this asteroid, and what was really great was we were able to measure that the asteroid's orbit was actually shifted by enough that if it were dangerous, we would have been able to avert its path.
So it demonstrated that it can be done. And
Yeah.
the D in DART, if I understand correctly, stands for defense.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So to close, we always like to ask you, what are you looking for in the night sky in coming weeks that might be of interest to those of us who are amateur sky watchers?
Yeah. Well, we've talked about the Orion constellation before. It's a wonderful one to look at in the night sky. And probably if people are familiar with it, you're used to seeing those 3 stars that make up Orion's belt. And I always love to point out at this time of year, what's going to happen is in December, Orion's going to be rising early in the evening. In January, it'll be a little bit higher. And then in February, it'll be in the southern sky. So while you might be used to looking for those 3 stars horizontally, what I want you to do is look low in the eastern sky and look for them vertically. Okay. So Orion's going to be coming up around 7:30 or 8:30 p.m.
So Orion available for the next several months.
Yeah.
Yeah, very nice. Dr. Chris Palma from the Penn State Department of Astronomy and Astrophysics, and also Associate Dean in the Eberly College of Science. Chris, thanks for joining us. And we will be back in a moment with more.